Welcome to Sourdough Bagels. You're going to find this is a very simple, reliable recipe. I've never had it not work for me. I start with 300 grams of water. I happen to use tap water. You're welcome to use filtered water. 2 teaspoons of salt. I'm using kosher salt, but table salt works exactly the same. And then 2 tablespoons of diastatic malt powder, which you can buy online. Just Google diastatic malt powder, followed by 100 grams of very active starter. My particular starter is not sour in taste. It's sweet, if anything. Um, I just happen to not want the sour taste. I now incorporate the water and breaking up the starter in it so that everything will mix well once I add the flours. Um, and you can use any proportions of flours you want. You can do all white flour, all whole wheat if you want. I happen to use half and half. I like the flavor, so I start with 320 grams of white bread flour, followed by 320 grams of whole wheat flour. I'm going to put the dough hook on and run it at a speed of 1 to incorporate the wet and dry ingredients. This is a very heavy, very dry dough. Throughout the process, you're going to feel like there's not enough moisture here. I can guarantee you there is. I have that same thought every time I'm making it. I'm thinking, I'm going to have to add more moisture. I'm going to have to, but I don't. So just trust the process, trust the measurements and the ratios. It will work out for you. Um, and you'll see that I'm going to do a little bit of kneading by hand and then back in the mixer bowl, and we'll get to that in just a second. So after about 2 minutes of mixing in the mixing bowl, you can take it out and incorporate what didn't mix in by hand kneading, and that usually takes 2 to 3 minutes. You'll keep at it till it's all incorporated. It feels like there's not enough moisture here. It always feels that way to me. It will to you too. Trust me, you will be able to get all of that loose stuff into your dough. You just keep kneading until it is, and at that point you move it back into the mixer, and I'll walk you through that in a moment. So after about 3 minutes of kneading by hand, you'll see that all of the ingredients, in fact, did get incorporated. I'm picking up the last bits of flour here. We're going to go back into the mixing bowl, um, dough hook back on, and run it at a speed of 1, maybe 2. Do not go higher than 2 on your speed on this. It puts too much strain on the motor. I burned one out and had to replace the gear drive in it. I don't want that to happen to you, and it will work fine. So if you feel like it's not getting everything on 1, go ahead and move it up to 2. And do not go longer than 3 minutes. You don't want to burn your motor out. You'll see that it gets warm. This really puts quite a bit of strain on it. So after 3 minutes back in the bowl with the dough hook on, I'm going to cover it with plastic wrap, and it's going to sit on my bench here for 8 to 12 hours. Um, it's a minimum of 8, and 12 certainly doesn't hurt it. If you want to go longer, to like 24 hours, you could let it rise in the refrigerator rather than on your bench. So this is the next morning at 7 a.m. It's been 9 hours for mine. The dough has risen a little bit, and once you handle it now, you'll see how much more pliable it is. It seems a lot moister than it was when you left it last night. Um, and I just kneaded it around a couple times to make sure that it's fully incorporated. I'm going to shape this into a ball that I'm going to flatten out because I want to circle. The dough is going to be divided into 8 pieces. So it's real easy to do if you start with a circle. I use my bench scraper to first cut the dough in half, and it has quite a bit of resistance because this dough is so dry. If you haven't done this before, you're going to think this isn't going to work, but it will work, trust me. So we again cut that in half, and those will be cut in half again as well. So these are going to be placed on a piece of parchment on a cookie sheet. There's Tavish the Wonder Dog. He always likes to come and catch any crumbs that might fall on the floor. So I'm gonna I just put the point down on the piece of dough because it's triangular, and get kind of a round shape. These are artisanal bagels. They don't have to be perfect, and I'm not too worried about that. I want to get them all into a ball shape, and that will help us get to that bagel shape. So as you finish up, you can go back and get them a little rounder if you want. You can see on the bottom this got wrinkles. I don't worry about that too much. Flatten it out a little bit, and I'm going to poke my thumb right through it. It makes kind of a rough hole. I then work my way around. So I'm getting a donut shape. I'm gonna leave all of them on here so you can see it happen. They're not perfectly even, and I'm not worried about it. I kind of like that they look a little bit funky when they're finished, and they're not absolutely perfect. So flatten it out, push your thumb through. It looks like it tears a little bit, and it does. And then just squeeze around as you're getting that donut shape. If it's not perfectly even, don't worry about it. It will work fine. It will still look and taste like a bagel. So I'm going to just let you watch as I do this. You can see it from the back side here. The thumb coming through. And I'm just kind of squeezing as I go around. So I'll let you watch this while I finish up, and you can see them all, and we'll move on to the next step in a moment. Through the magic of editing, we're at the last bagel. Once it gets shaped, it's going to be covered with a kitchen towel, and it's going to rest for an hour. The whole point of that is to let the dough relax a little bit before we move into the cooking part of this, and that's coming up next. So 1 hour rest. About 30 minutes into the 1 hour rest, I turn on the oven and preheat it to 425 degrees Fahrenheit or 220 Celsius. And I prepare a pot that's going to have boiling water in it to boil the bagels. I add a tablespoon of sugar and 2 tablespoons of diastatic malt powder. The combination of the sugar and the malt powder helps give the bagel that nice sheen that we've come to expect, and also puts a nice crust on it. You could use baking soda or malt syrup. I happen to use these two, and they work great for me. So once we get our water to a nice rolling boil, it's time to put the bagels in. Often they will float. Today they didn't. They sunk to the bottom. If you don't loosen them from the bottom, they will be stuck down there. So I'm going to take the slotted spoon, give them a little nudge to get them to come up. They are going to boil for 2 minutes on this side and 1 minute on the other side. So after 2 minutes, I'll flip them over. And you will notice that they puff up considerably while this is happening. I do want to monitor this so that it doesn't overboil while we're going along. So once the bagels go in the boiling water, obviously they cool it down considerably, and you're going to have to watch the temperature and make adjustments to keep it a rolling boil. I turn mine up, and then I got to keep a real close eye on it because it's very simple to have it boil over. It makes a mess that you can't believe. You don't want that to happen. As long as you're here, then you're keeping an eye on the clock too. So it's 2 minutes on this side, and at that point you'll use the slotted spoon to flip them over and make adjustments for the temperature as the boil gets a little higher. There you see I'm turning it down just a little bit. And when the next 4 go in, it'll be the same thing. You'll monitor it. You'll have to scrape them off the bottom if they sink. Sometimes they float, sometimes they don't. It doesn't seem to affect whether the bagels are successful or not if they sink to the bottom the first time when you put them in. So we've reached the 2-minute mark, and it's time to flip the bagels over. You'll see that the bottom side of these are a little raggedy looking. That's because these are artisanal bagels. That's my excuse when things don't look the way I want them to look. But it doesn't affect the flavor. I imagine that you could spend a lot of time making sure that you have a perfectly round formed bagel. That's not important to me. If the aesthetic is important to you, go ahead and do that. I'm happy here, so they are going to boil for 1 minute. On this side, I'll take the slotted spoon, get them out, and place them on the parchment paper, and then do the same thing for the final 4. If you want poppy seed or bagel seasoning or sesame seeds on your bagels, once they have been boiled, you can brush them with an egg wash and then dip them into a bowl filled with poppy seeds or sesame seeds or whatever you want. I prefer mine plain. And also, while you're doing this, once you've made the simple bagel, obviously you could add raisins and cinnamon and whatever you want into a bagel. I prefer mine plain, and that's what I make, and it's a great way to start so you have an understanding how the process works. But always know that you can start to incorporate whatever you like into yours. So I flip these back over, make sure they're facing upright, so that's the better looking side when it comes time to bake them. And then we'll get we repeat this exact same thing for the other 4. These are hot, you really don't want to handle them with your hand right now. And back in with the other 4. So our oven is preheated to 425 degrees. I simply slide the tray in. They're going to bake in my oven for a total of 17 minutes. I'm going to have them 12 minutes on one side. I come back and I flip them all over. You see they're browned nicely, but they're not quite done. And to make sure that they bake evenly, I flip them over. They're pretty hot. I use a hot pad, a combination of the hot pad and my fingers. You don't want to hang on to these because they're pretty darn hot. I'll go back in the oven for an additional 5 minutes. So once the additional 5 minutes is up, they come out and I'm going to put them on the rack. They're going to cool for 30 minutes. They are not done cooking. Like any bread, if you were to cut into it at this point, it would be gummy and gooey inside. Bagels are small, so they cool pretty quickly, so I'm going to let them sit here for 30 minutes before I cut one open. We have some people coming over this morning, and I want to share fresh bagels with them, so they should actually be in the house in about 30 minutes. So onto the rack they go, and get to cut one open in just 30 minutes from now. So here's a look at the finished cooled bagel. It helps to have a good bread knife. I picked this one up at Costco. They sell them 2 for $11, and it's an amazing bread knife. I gave one away and kept one. If you need a bread knife, that's the place to get an affordable one. Nice chewy texture, a great crust. It crackles a little bit as you're cutting through it. Um, there's my finished bagels. And just so you know, if I can do this, so can you.